Hey, all right, all right. What is up, everybody? It is me, Mike Vanderpool, with Anthony Wayne Innovation and Design, and we are here with a special edition of the Make It Happen podcast. I'm here with James Warnken. James is somebody who I just met. We've had about a 15-minute conversation where I gave him my life story, and now I'm interested here now to hear yours, James. Thank you for coming on today.
Well, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Excited to have the conversation. I won't give you the full 28-year timeline, but happy to give a quick sort of overview on how I got to where I am July 2025. So I always like to start my story, my introductions at the age of 9, because that's when I was diagnosed with what is called Stargardt's disease. So Stargardt's is a progressive genetic visual impairment. So over time, my vision just gets worse. So up until 9 years old, 2020, no signs of anything. And then at a church play, actually, I had a hard time reading the signs they were holding in the back, went to multiple eye doctors. One of them finally said, he's not just being a stubborn kid. He's actually, there's something more going on here. So finally got to the bottom of it. The nature of Stargardt's is very unpredictable. For some people, it progresses fast. Other people, it's slow. For me, it's been pretty steady, slow over time over the last 18, 19 years at this point. But with that comes a lot of adaptation, a lot of change, a lot of fine-tuning and tweaking. As my general vision gets worse, my peripheral is much better than my central. So a lot of times I look off to the sides to look straight. But for me, it's been a lot of that fine tuning, making the text bigger and bigger, transitioning from large print to learning how to use a screen reader, learning how to read and write in Braille, learning how to navigate with a cane, doing all of those things, not because I need them today, but because I might need them in the future. So it's a combination of what works today and what am I going to need potentially tomorrow, because it's so unpredictable. But ultimately, like you mentioned when you were introducing yourself, I also wanted to take the route of being an architect. Well, first it was professional sports. I wanted to play basketball, but I not tall enough and I can't see well enough. Kind of passed on that one. Architecture, building, designing, being creative was very interesting to me. And then when I was in high school, I took a career tech that led me down the path of business. So decided to go to college for business marketing because advertising, it was still creative, but a little bit less intimidating than architecture. And designing buildings and blueprints and all of that. So I went throughout a business marketing, initially started my career in the field of search engine optimization, optimizing websites for search like Bing and Google and Yahoo. Moved from that into e-commerce with Amazon. Moved from that into automations and general digital marketing, building and designing websites, running Google ads, running social media, setting up emails, doing all of the technical marketing stuff in the back end, not so much the front end like what we're doing now with a podcast or recording and editing. And I really wasn't into that side of it. I enjoyed being sort of behind the curtain, if you will. Had my own company, started it while I was in college to help pay for college. Grew that, eventually joined a startup, helped scale that startup. And while I was helping scale that startup, I transitioned and started finding myself in conversations talking about accessibility. Now, growing up as a person with a disability, there's a lot of stereotypes, there's a lot of stigmas, there's a lot of that's too dangerous. You shouldn't do that. That's not the best idea. Play it safe. I learned how to be an imposter, essentially, how to hide my disability, how to fake it till I made it, how to do all of that stuff. Don't talk about it unless I need to or unless somebody asks. And when I found myself in those conversations about accessibility, that was a whole new world to me, because I was under the impression that I needed to make my little world accessible to me. I wasn't aware of this whole other side of the conversation. Yes, I had an IEP in school, but that's school. That's not the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that conversation, I leaned into it and said, I'm not comfortable with myself as a person with a disability, let alone talking to a business and telling them what doesn't work. So I leaned into it, and I spent almost 2 years researching and getting mentorship and experimenting, playing with the websites that I was still working on, trying to learn as much as I could about accessibility from not just my own perspective, but from a fully blind perspective, from a colorblind, from deaf, hard of hearing, from cognitive, mobility, seizures, and I was just fascinated by this whole world that essentially opened up right in front of me. And one of my mentors early on asked me the question if I wanted to diagnose the problem or be the solution. And for me, I wanted to be the solution. Like going and telling people what was wrong, that still feels today a little bit foreign to me. Like it doesn't feel natural to just talk about what's broken and what doesn't work. I've always been the let's fix this type. And so trying to figure out where that fits in, I don't have a programming background. I don't have a super technical background. It's all self-taught through the marketing lens, but
Mm-hmm.
through doing that and trying to figure out what solution, I started to realize and take a look at the accessibility industry as a whole. July, we're about to celebrate 35 years since the ADA was signed. And I just started asking questions of why is this as far as we are? What can I bring to the table as somebody who lives with a disability, as somebody who comes from a tech background? What is the landscape? Getting the lay of the land. And ultimately, what I found was to a lot of organizations, whether you're public, whether you're private, you're a nonprofit, accessibility costs a lot of money. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of time, and it requires a particular set of skills and expertise. And most organizations don't have all three of those. Most of them only maybe have one. And so I really started looking at the accessibility industry and trying to figure out how can we lower that barrier of entry, because accessibility isn't like marketing, it isn't like operations, it isn't like finance. It's one of those things that applies to all aspects of the business, whether it's HR, it's marketing, it's IT. How can we lower that barrier of entry to where accessibility isn't something that we wish we could do, but we can't? Because I was getting a lot of, that's awesome, good luck with that. That's awesome, I wish we could do that. That's awesome, we don't have budget right now. I got all of that for years. And so trying to figure out how to lower that barrier of entry has kind of become what my goal is. And the way that happens is through special projects, through education, through training, through consulting. And instead of you paying me and we sign a 3-year contract and James makes 6 figures, that would be awesome. But that's not really realistic.
Mm-hmm.
What is realistic is me coming into an organization, spending time with your developers and saying, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how we can fix it. And putting that knowledge in the organization, not in me as an outside vendor or contractor. And so I come in and I do the lunch and learns and the how do you communicate and interact with people with disabilities? How do you make a website that's accessible, an app, a document? Right now I'm doing a Power BI accessibility training, which I don't know anything about Power BI. But I know a thing or two about accessibility. And so it's finding ways to build accessibility within the organization so that it's not a one and done. It's not an after the fact. It's not something that is super big and intimidating and costly and time consuming. And we need all of these people. And yeah, let's add the legal conversation on top of it. Like there's so many facets and aspects to the conversation. And I try to just come into an organization almost like an employee, but hired to do a very specific set of things when it comes to accessibility and not overstay my welcome. I don't want to sign a 10-year contract with you. I want to be in and out as quick as possible because 96% of websites aren't readily accessible. I have enough work to do. But finding the organizations that are ready today is one of the biggest challenges because there's a lot of education to get to being ready that has to happen. And there aren't too many people out there that are willing to do that preliminary education. I just made it a part of my process. And so there's more and more organizations every day coming around to this idea of accessibility. I know we're in weird times right now with the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion thing going on from a political standpoint, but all things aside, accessibility is more than a legal risk. It's more than a compliance. It's more than a checkbox. It's more than just the right thing to do. It's providing equal opportunity, equal access, regardless of somebody's ability to see what's on the screen, to hear the
Mhm.
audio content, to get the news and the updates, and participate in our society. And I want to do what I can as a part of that community to change it for the people that are in the community with me. So
Mhm.
uh, that's not quite the 28-year timeline, but very long-winded way of finding my passion through my own lived experience. It wasn't something that I thought I would be doing, and nor would I change it for anything else.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I don't want to I don't need everything, because Thursday, right, next Thursday, what is it, July 17th, you're going to be coming down to Toledo, to the Toledo Tech Loft. Greg Miller with the Google Developer Group is bringing you in. Toledo Codes as a co-sponsor of that event. You're going to be hanging out and you're going to be talking about understanding the true user experience with assistive technology. So I do have some experience with compliance with regarding being in the education space. Education, if you've got a .gov or a .edu website, you're forced to be compliant. Um, and one of the things that I learned along the way, and this is I think some of the approaches you're taking, right, is like it's so much easier to make things accessible up front than it is to retroactively go back and fix them. It's much more expensive to fix after the fact. So what you're doing, going in and helping teach the organization what it means and how to implement, helps them just from throwing more stuff on the pile that they're going to have to inevitably fix later.
And I get hired to do testing and remediation and
Nice.
write the VPATs that those .edus and .govs need.
And VPAT is, I'm sorry, VPAT is, what is that
Uh,
again? What
it's
does it
a
stand for?
voluntary product accessibility template. It's just basically a document that says, "Here's how compliant we are."
Yeah.
At the end of the day, but
So if you're looking for a product from a vendor, they'll have that VPAT, and then you've
yep,
got the assurance from them that it's an accessible
yeah,
technology that you can
I
use.
get hired to do all kinds of projects, research the UX UI. That's how Greg and I originally met, was at a UX conference, and so this whole concept of understanding the true user experience. It's kind of the narrative, that early narrative of understanding a blind person or a low vision person or somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing, getting on the same page to where that's not such an awkward or uncomfortable conversation, because any of us, no matter what device we have assistive technology built into the operating systems and the devices
Mm-hmm.
and the browsers that we all use, whether it's Windows or it's Apple or it's Chrome or it's Safari or it's Firefox. They all have accessibility features built into them. So it's a matter of becoming aware that those exist, turning them on, playing with them, and understanding that your interpretation of them versus somebody who has to rely on that is still going to be different, but you're much closer when you're aware, and you know kind of how they work. And so the big part of the conversation is that legally blind, low vision, blind perspective that I'm bringing to the table from a lived part of the conversation. And whether that's a screen reader, it's magnification, it's high contrast mode, it's a braille display, it's the AI smart glasses. Like, there's so much technology out there, and my goal with this conversation is to bring that conversation to life. I don't want to stand up there and talk for 2 hours. I want to have a discussion. I want people to be curious and be comfortable asking questions. If I were to make this video and put it on YouTube, what could I do to make sure it's
Mm-hmm.
accessible? If I am adding this type of content to my website, what can I do to make sure it's accessible? How much risk am I at in this space? Like, I want those kind of questions, because I teach and I train and I answer those questions all day long. And so this is kind of a safe space to come in and be curious and explore without feeling like you're being rude or insensitive.
I found early on in my career as an instructional designer that accessibility was something that was a little bit glossed over, um,
Oh,
on the
absolutely.
teaching side. And then when I ended up, working in the field, I think I don't know how many instructional designers we had. We had at least 10, and they all came from different different educational backgrounds, is most people were not very much aware of what accessibility even means and how to even begin to think about it and implement it. One of the things I do now when I teach it as part of my design classes is I will have people shut their eyes and listen to something read by a screen reader at 300 words per minute.
Yep.
And I'm like, now imagine if all the content in the world was created like this for everybody. How could you interact with it? And
Right.
that I think provides some of that perspective on how people sometimes have to engage with the traditional content.
And there's a ton of ways to make it feel real, like you just described with shut your eyes and listen to 300 words per minute and tell me if you can even understand it,
It's
because
wild.
you have to
It's
be
so wild.
trained. You train to be able to interpret that fast, but take away the audio on a YouTube video and read the captions that are automatically generated, and how many typos and grammar issues and misspellings do you see in there?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine there's simulators everywhere online. You can simulate all different types of color blindness, dyslexia at different levels and severities, photosensitivity. Like there's so many ways to feel that experience that I just don't think a lot of people are aware of, and so this conversation is kind of a part of that broader conversation, which I'm also going to be having it later in October. I just found out yesterday that I'll be presenting at WordPress Accessibility Day,
Oh,
talking
phenomenal.
about the blind and visually impaired perspective when it comes to accessibility, and what are some of those things that we don't even think about because we're turning a screen reader on, but we're still looking at the screen. And so we're hearing and we're seeing, and that's a whole different experience separate from just hearing or just seeing, because we're filling in the gaps subconsciously. And so this conversation, whether it's for instructional designers, it's for business owners, it's for IT departments, it's for marketing teams, HR teams, like we all have a part to play in the accessibility outcomes, and so I'm excited to see who's in the room, what questions are brought up, and what that sparks for those around them. It's always cool to see how the conversation goes when it's really not scripted. It's not a 2-hour lecture presentation with 58 slides. It's very organic, and it's very fun to just see what rabbit holes people dive down when we open up the first conversation around accessibility at a broad level.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear the questions, and if nobody has any questions, I've got more than a few that I'm trying not to ask right now, because it's a fascinating topic for me, because it's something that it just is. When we talk about, I think I met some blind developers back in the day, and as part of the coding experience I was having, or teaching people how to code, and I did some of the research, and like 70% of blind people are unemployed.
Yep.
Was the figure back then. It's like that's wild, and it feels like if we could find ways to train them, or provide some assistive technology, they don't necessarily have to be unemployed, right?
Yeah. One of the primary organizations that I work with is called the Blind Institute of Technology.
Okay.
And they are a staffing and recruiting agency helping professionals with disabilities find careers. And they also provide the training and the upskilling and the certifications. I actually teach the accessibility course with them, helping professionals with disabilities. I've trained more than 100 over the last couple of years to get into this accessibility conversation, just like I did. Where it was my understanding of accessibility, and then opening those floodgates to this whole industry. And who better to lead the conversation of accessibility than somebody with a disability that's impacted by inaccessible design? But BIT is one of those organizations that is trying to close that employment gap. We always talk about within the BIT conversation, technology being the greatest equalizer. I didn't come up with that. Mike Hess, founder, executive director of BIT, one of my mentors, he's actually the one who posed that initial question about being the solution to me. We've worked together ever since. And so there's so much to this conversation. There's so much opportunity and potential out there. people just haven't come around to it yet. They haven't been opened up to it. They haven't been made aware. And that's all I'm trying to do is be that awareness component early on, and then be there to train and educate, because whether you stay with that company or you move on somewhere else, you're still going to have that knowledge. That's not something that you're going to just leave with that organization as a developer, a designer, whatever role title you want to insert there.
Yeah, that's been the most phenomenal part. I did a deep dive in it when I started my instructional design career, and it's something that has stuck with me, and I've been able to apply in almost everything that I do. So love the work that you're doing. Looking forward to meeting you in person.
Oh, I'm looking. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, July 17th. It's at 6:00. Toledo Codes is one of the sponsors. I know they bring food, so there will be food for people that want to come and hang out. Justin Beaudry with Toledo Codes, Greg Miller with GDG, Google Developer Group Toledo. AAF Toledo is also a sponsor. The American Advertising, Val's going to kill me. I think it's Federation. Val Thompson is the head of that. Should be a really good group of technologists, marketers. We'll try to make sure we get some educators and other folks in the space, because this assistive technology, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more at the event. Yes, it is something that is important for the people who need it, but there's also some benefits for other folks who just benefit from the way that we're designing things to be more accessible for everybody.
Absolutely. 100% agree. I'm excited. I believe it's my first time to Toledo.
Let's go.
Excited.
We'll 20 tacos, get you a hot dog for lunch if you're in early.
I'll be there. So looking forward to it, and excited to see where the conversation leads.
All right, James. I will see you then. Thanks for the time today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. See you then.